A small house, a small dwelling in a Mediterranean city many centuries ago. The settlement clusters around the small deep-water port that provides its purpose and its livelihood. The place is Myra, in the early 4th century, a vital port on the long, inhospitable coast that offered rare and valuable safe harbour between the provinces of Africa and the Roman Empire's capital. Myra is like a service station, useful, sometimes a welcome sight, but rarely loved. We see the town at night. Looking in closer, zooming in over the tile roofs, the maze of streets, boats riding the gentle tide at rest in the harbour, watchmen making their patrols as the last few stagger home from the inns and taverns, until we single in on a small dwelling in the tangle of whitewashed houses. It could be described as simple. There is not much in the way of furniture inside this home, but what there is good quality but worn. In a bed there are 3 children, 3 little girls. Their father, beaten down by care and a little aged by worry, sits in a chair by a window. He is trying to wait up, but despite his many worries and the importance of his task, he finds himself dozing off. This man is a trader, once moderately wealthy, but now almost bankrupt. Things are only getting worse, and his daughters are approaching the age of marriage. Without anything to offer as a dowry for one daughter, let alone 3, the prospects look bleak. If debts are called in, everything he has could be taken. He and his children bonded into slavery. Without prospect of marriage for his daughters, the only option might be to sell the only thing they have, themselves. In any case, the 4th century did not deal kindly with poor, unmarried, unprotected young women. His plight is known, and he has been offered the sympathy and commiserations of his friends and neighbours, but little else. However, for the past 2 nights, some mysterious benefactor, has left an anonymous gift at the house. After an exhausting day, and with the embers of the fire still providing some heat, the household sleeps. In the shadows outside, something stirs. A hooded figure creeps stealthily towards the house. A hand emerges from the recesses of its robe, and there is a clink and the faint glint of something metal concealed. Reaching up to the window, the figure pushes something through, and it lands with a sudden thud on the floor inside. The father wakes with a start, waking his daughters in turn. Later, when the story is told and retold, people will say that the bag landed in one of the girls' shoes or snagged in a stocking hanging up to dry. The father scrambles outside in time to catch sight of a familiar figure disappearing into the evening gloom. Inside, quickly and cautiously, the father moves to investigate this parcel, whilst his children crowd round to see. Its content is the same as the bags that were left on the last 2 nights. The miracle has been repeated. Glinting in the ember light is a cache of coins, enough for a dowry. Whilst the girls wonder what to make of it, the father sits down to think on the familiar figure he saw running from his house. The figure disappearing into the shadows that night was St. Nicholas, the young boy bishop of Myra in ancient Turkey, a young man from a Christian family who was proclaimed bishop early in his life by his fellows, endured the persecutions of various later emperors, and lived to see the same empire become a Christian state under Constantine and the great Council of Nicaea, whose creed or statement of basic belief we still give voice to today. Saint Nicholas of Myra, remembered 6th of December. St. Nicholas is an early saint in the Christian tradition, living in the 3rd to 4th century. Parts of his legend are confused by the fact that several of his successor bishops were also named Nicholas, as were other abbots and religious figures in the area, several of whom are saints. One of the results of his popularity in the years following his death was that Nicholas became a very common Christian name in the area. The stories of the baby Nicholas refusing to eat on Wednesdays and Fridays, which were fast days in the early church, or his standing as an infant with his arms out in the shape of a cross in his bath, are likely those of a later Nicholas, as are the stories of his having an uncle in Myra who was a priest, or his travelling there to join him in the religious life just as the Bishop of Myra died. When the clergy gathered to appoint his successor, one had a dream in which he was told that the first person to enter the cathedral that morning would be the new bishop, and that his name would be Nicholas. When the clergy gathered to wait, the young Nicholas, arriving fresh from the boat and wanting to give thanks for a safe journey, was first into the cathedral, and was hailed the new bishop. This too is likely a legend of a later Nicholas, if for no other reason than during his early years there would not have been a cathedral and clergy chapter as we would understand them today. When Nicholas was a young man, Christianity was persecuted. He became the leader of the small Christian community in Myra. Being a port on the major trade route, Christianity had come early to the region, and it was visited by St. Paul. Nicholas was imprisoned, tortured, and beaten on several occasions over these years. His most famous story is his act of charity to the three maidens, secretly gifting money to them to pay for their dowries. This is a story that is unique to St. Nicholas. If it had been the invention of later centuries, it is likely that they would have had the young girls becoming nuns rather than being married off, or have had the family explicitly convert to Christianity. Instead, this has the ring of truth as the story that has been with Nicholas from the very start. At the time, charity was not common, and anonymous charity was practically unheard of. The least a patron wanted was to be hailed and acclaimed. Nicholas's anonymous act to a family that he had no responsibility for or connection to, simply because he heard that they were in real need, would have been shocking and hard to understand. When the new emperor allowed the toleration of Christianity in 321, it marked a shift for the faith. Nicholas's role began to change in the town as people began to cozy up to the faith the emperor had adopted, and it was found that some church officials were harder to bribe than the old guard. Nicholas is recorded opening up the granaries to relieve hunger during a famine. Another legend has him rushing out to stop the execution of 3 soldiers falsely accused and convicted on perjured evidence. The bishop, condemning the magistrate for selling justice and reputedly grabbing the executioner's sword or laying his neck over the neck of the condemned prisoners in order to save their lives. One of his more famous legends, which finds its way into the papers every other year under headlines like "Vicar Scares Children with Cannibal Santa," tells of Nicholas travelling through the region during another famine, possibly on the way to the council at Nicaea. Nicholas came one night to a prosperous inn on a major road. The innkeeper, pleased to have such a noble guest, assured him of a fine bed, a comfortable chair by the fire, and a good meaty stew for the evening. Nicholas was delighted and settled in. But, after a while, he suddenly wondered where the landlord could have gotten the ingredients for such a stew. The bishop and most of the region were starving. Food was scarce. Meat almost unheard of. Going into the kitchen to make inquiries, the bishop was horrified to find that the landlord had killed 3 small boys, and that their remains were now in a pickle barrel, waiting to be prepared. The bishop is said to have remonstrated with the publican before miraculously restoring the boys to life through prayer. It is possible that this story has its origins in a misunderstanding regarding paintings of St. Nicholas rescuing the 3 prisoners. In traditional Byzantine art, the saints are often depicted as much larger than other figures, and it is possible that over time people misunderstood paintings that showed a large Nicholas next to three naked prisoners being led out by a swordsman from a prison or stylized tower, turning them into a landlord and three children coming out of a barrel. Of course, this may be wrong. This may just be another miracle. Nicholas is often cited as one of the figures at the Council of Nicaea, where the Christian creed was written. Called by Emperor Constantine, it was not a great distance from Nicholas's home in Myra. However, Nicholas is not included on the original, admittedly incomplete and contradictory lists of attendees. However, as his fame and popularity spread over the centuries, people found it hard to imagine that such a great figure might not have attended such an important event. He was included on the lists of those present. In time, he was accounted as having joined in the general dissatisfaction with the heretical Bishop Arius. As time went by, he became a leading light, engaging in deep debate, carrying the Orthodox party, denouncing heresy in general and Arius in particular. It may have taken Nicholas 500 years to get to Nicaea, but once there, he proved invaluable. Nicholas is said to have punched Arius during the debate. For this, he was stripped of his position and thrown into prison. While later centuries acknowledged defenestration as a legitimate form of theological debate, the early church at this time still disapproved of bishops brawling. Nicholas returned to the council the next day, after having been handed his Bible and his robes by a vision of the Virgin Mary and Christ, who released him from his prison cell. Whether this occurred or not is open to debate. Peaceful debate, we hope. Certainly Nicholas was a staunch defender of his faith and had been imprisoned for it before. However, all the other acts of his life show someone dedicated to a peaceful expression of faith. Nicholas died on the 6th of December, 343. He had led the destruction of the old pagan temple in Myra and was buried in his cathedral church. He is the first recorded saint whose body exuded a fragrant liquid called myrrh or manna each year on the anniversary of his death. His bones, now in Bari in Italy, still exude a small amount of liquid, which testing has shown to have the same chemical makeup as water found in the region of Myra, distinct from that in the Italian region. Nicholas's legend spread along trade routes, his miracles always associated with a certain practical streak. One account of sailors, of whom Nicholas is the patron saint, calling out for his aid in a storm, recount that the saint not only appeared to calm the waters, but also lent a hand with the ropes and the rigging. Nicholas is patron saint of Russia, where the people there took him to their heart, seeing a man who could not only pray for them, but break their chains and give justice and food. He has been sought as patron by many, many groups and peoples, from Russia to sailors, maidens to military intelligence, brides, prisoners, prostitutes, bankers, bakers, ribbon weavers, wildebeest and sheep in Poland, even pawnbrokers, who still signify their loyalty to St. Nicholas by hanging his symbol, 3 golden balls, referring to the 3 sacks of money, above their doors in his honour. The chocolate coins popular at Christmas are a tribute to his rescuing of the 3 maidens. As patron saint of children, and giving legends of his becoming a bishop at a young age, it was common to mark his feast day in Europe by enthroning a boy bishop. A child from the choir would be made bishop of the cathedral for a week, echoing the example given by Christ of having the faith and trust of a child, and meant to signify the holy and simple ministry that bishops should have. Unfortunately, many boy bishops appear to have copied the ministries of the bishops they saw, emphasizing their worst qualities. There are many accounts of the bishops having installed their friends from the choir as their cathedral clergy, spending vast amounts on a week of feasting, heavy drinking, entertainment, and loose women. The practice was banned in England by Elizabeth I, who felt it unbecoming to the dignity of the episcopal office. It was allowed again under Elizabeth II, and numerous cathedrals enthrone a boy bishop whose tenures are usually markedly more peaceful than their predecessors. In Holland, one tradition, not suppressed by the Reformation, which still continues, is the celebration of St. Nicholas. However, this figure has little to do with the historic saint. In fact, everything that is associated with this Dutch figure, his arrival from Spain by boat, his riding through the streets in a cope and mitre to the cathedral, his Moorish servants, and his checking his accounting ledgers to see who has been good or naughty, are more the case of a newly independent and Protestant Netherlands remembering what the Spanish Catholic bishops of the past were like, rather than the Saint of Myra. One impact is their name for him, with the name Nicholas rendered Klaus in Holland. Their St. Nicholas has given the world Santa Claus. In America, where his name spread, the first modern images of Father Christmas were produced. There is a myth that his red clothing comes from Coca-Cola or a lingering Catholic tradition, but this is not the case. It is true Father Christmas was shown in green and a variety of other colours in the 19th century. Red came about when one American artist drew a picture of Father Christmas as a rustic backwoodsman in brown leathers and fur. A new cheap form of colour printing had just come in, and the publishers wanted to show it off to best commercial advantage. Feeling that brown did not look good or too impressive on the page, they changed it to red. With new mass printing, this image stuck. The body of the real St. Nicholas was removed from Myra by Norman sailors from Italy during the Muslim conquest of the area. The 3 remaining monks at the church in Myra refused to tell the sailors, who came claiming to want to rescue the remains from the approaching armies, where the tomb was located. They were given 1 night before the Normans would return and take the body by force. In the morning, the abbot reported he had seen Nicholas in a dream, and that the saint had told him that he wished to travel to Italy. He was duly translated to Bari in Italy. A number of years later, Venetian sailors came to Myra to rescue the body, and returned with the bodies of 3 bishops of Myra, all saints, all called Nicholas. Both Venice and Bari have disputed who holds the body of Nicholas since. Examination of the tombs have revealed that the bones in Venice are a large number of smaller and broken bones, whilst Bari has a collection of larger unbroken bones. They are complementary to each other, and tests reveal that they come from the same body. It seems likely that the Bari sailors jumped in and grabbed everything that they could, breaking some bones in the process. When the Venetians turned up, they collected the fragments that had been missed, and then took the other 2 bodies of St. Nicholas from Myra to counter any possible accusations of failure. In 1992, the bones were examined, and the skull was used to reconstruct St. Nicholas's face in 2014. Examination revealed the body of an older man with a prominent chin. He had osteoarthritis and showed evidence that he had been badly treated and likely imprisoned in his lifetime, and that he had eaten a largely vegetarian diet. Why do we remember St. Nicholas today? Through his long history, we return once and again to the legend of the 3 maidens, this one act of surprising charity, in no way a miracle, that first established his legend and continued to be at the heart of why he was and is exemplified. Though tales of his restoring life to children or commanding the sea in life as in death may seem to many to be far-fetched tales that come unstuck under the light of rational or considered thinking, this simple act of very human charity has stuck fast. We might never know what it is like to freeze in the winter and to live in fear of the wolf and bear. Most of us can only imagine what it must be to face down a heathen army single-handedly, and there can be few for whom discourse with the birds, or holy men carrying their head under their arm while preaching a sermon, are matters of daily fare, as they evidently once were for hagiographers. For St. Nicholas, so active in that time of great men and great decisions, when miracles flowed so freely about the works of the Church, it is an act of charity to those in need, people left stranded and helpless by financial straits, that we are all able to understand and sympathise with as keenly now as then, that has cemented this early Bishop of Myra in his place, an act that, although divinely inspired, sprang entirely from human agency. The example of the Church, of a good Christian, reaching out a hand to help when all others offered was sympathy at most. A devout man giving, not pennies from heaven, but his own money to help others, and at the end of his lifetime, at the end of subsequent centuries of miracles and divine acts, it is still those three gifts, the three golden sacks, that he carries to this day as his symbol in icons, stained glass, and frosting sugar. St. Nicholas is remembered on the 6th of December.